All right, lesson 3, we're going to talk about the advanced sliders in Lightroom. This is basically color manipulation. What we're going to be doing here is adjusting the photo for our specific style. But there are 2 points I want to make right now. When you adjust a photo, you're adjusting one of 4 things, and that's, 3 things. That's either the saturation, hue, or luminance of a single or multiple pixels within your photograph. Point number 2 is you don't need to manipulate the colors in your photograph in order for your style to show through. You can take a photograph intentionally with colors inside of it. So right now I'm in a frame wearing a red shirt intentionally with a white background, and this is so that I will pop out. And this shirt is a color that I love, a style that I love, and so I chose this shirt on purpose. You can be intentional with what you're shooting, where you're shooting, how you're shooting, and all of that to get your style without having to edit it at all. And this is after we've gone through normalization. Let me show you what I mean. Just to show you, I love my little stick man, so I've got another drawing, but take a look at this photo. This is a stick man. This is your photo before, sorry, it's not a stick man, it's your photo. It's a photo before it's been normalized, all wacky, weird, and bonky, right? But then you got this photo here, drawing. Then you got this drawing here of a normal stick man. He's been normalized. Admittedly, he is not wearing any clothes, but that's okay. The clothes are the style. All right, stick man number 3, he's got style. Look at that top hat, look at those pants. Looks so great. But moving on, in Lightroom, there's multiple different ways that you can manipulate your colors. And as I mentioned beforehand, you're manipulating one of 3 things. And what those are is saturation is color intensity. It's how intense your color is. So you can choose a color, or you can choose the general image and increase the saturation. For the hue, you're adjusting a specific color to look like a different color. Luminosity is something different. It is the brightness of a specific color. Admittedly, if you bring down the luminosity of a specific color, it might increase in saturation, which is okay. But those are the 3 things that you're adjusting in Lightroom. Let me show you how to do it. In the basic tab, which we talked about for normalizing your photos, there's the vibrancy and the saturation slider. The vibrancy slider adjusts the colors in your image that don't have a lot of saturation. It basically brings the saturation levels to a normal, consistent level. So let's say my yellows are super saturated, but my greens aren't. If I increase my vibrancy, it's gonna boost the green. And then the saturation slider, that just saturates the general image. What I like to do for my photos is I'll increase the vibrancy because I like to have a nice colorful image, and then I'll decrease the saturation. Because the vibrancy slider increases the general saturation of the image, I kind of like to pull the saturation down. Moving on down below, your Lightroom will not look like this, but if you scroll down, you get to a calibration tab. And what this does is it allows you to adjust the hues and saturations of a specific color range. So red primary, green primary, blue primary. One thing I do want to point out, 2 things actually. Color can be emotion. So if your colors are yellow, it's a little bit more happy, a little bit more forward. If your colors are blue, it's a little bit calm and peaceful, and maybe wise in a lot of sense, in some ways. If your colors are red, then it's angry, right? Your colors can provoke emotions. If you take a look at La La Land, super famous movie, they used colors a lot there to guide the feel of the movie. The second thing is that warmer colors generally are like moving towards the subject, like you feel like pulled towards it, and cooler colors kind of push away. If you look at a really blue image or photograph, it kind of feels distance almost. It almost adds a 3D effect to it. There's a difference here, and you can play with that by adjusting the temperature sliders, which we talked about in the last lesson, or however the way you want to do it. Moving on to the tone curve. The tone curve is important. It is basically the histogram in that it records the pixels and the ranges that they're in. So on the left, you have blacks and shadows. On the right, you got whites and highlights. But what it does is it separates it into colors. So you can adjust the highlights of a given color. If I'm over here on the red tab, the red channel, I can increase the highlights and bring them up to red, and it's going to make my highlights a little bit more red. If I go the opposite direction, and the opposite direction of this red is teal, then it will make my highlights more of a teal. For this image, I'm not going to really adjust it too much. I'm just showing you what the sliders do, but that's the main point with this tone curve here. And you can swap between these different channels to get different colors. It's as simple as that. It really isn't too complicated. When people say that the tone curve is complicated and, oh, you don't want to get into it, it really isn't. It's the histogram, but with a bendy, wobbly line that allows you to have more flexibility. One really popular thing that people like doing is creating an S-curve, and you can do that by just essentially raising your whites and your highlights and decreasing your blacks and shadows. It's basically what we did in the basics tab. I talked about it earlier, where you increase the shadows and the whites and decrease everything else. It's a similar thing, and it creates a lot of contrast. Something you can also do from here is you can copy these channel settings and paste them into the color settings to get a little bit more of a color contrast and just a lot more color in your image. I don't like doing that. It makes it oversaturated. You can also decrease the saturation if you need to on the basics tab, but I don't like that. So we're going to bring that all the way back down, and then we're going to go to the color mixer. This is a super important tab, my favorite tab. This is where you get to adjust specific colors. There's three things that I mentioned earlier: the hue, saturation, and luminance. If you go over to the hue tab, you see all these sliders. And by the way, I've clicked on mixer here, and for adjust, I've clicked on HSL. You can click color as well, but I like HSL. It gives me a little bit more control. But if you're in the hue section here, you can adjust the hue of the reds, you can adjust the hue of the greens or the blues or the purples or whatever. It's really simple. You just change the color of a color. So let's give this a try. If I go over to this green slider here and I move it around, you can see that I'm changing the color of the green. That's literally all it is. You just need to know what colors look good. If you head over to the saturation tab, same thing. You increase the saturation or decrease the saturation for any given color. I'm going to select green. You see, I'm adjusting the saturation for that specific color. Very simple. Luminance, the brightness of that color. You can see what's happening here. And you can adjust all these different sliders to create specific contrast, specific color styles, whatever. Lightroom doesn't have sliders that make your photo more beautiful. Lightroom gives you control of your photograph, and you need to know what you want to do with that photograph. One really popular thing that people do with the color mixer here is they increase the saturation of the warmer colors, so red, orange, and yellow, and then they decrease the saturation of everything else. But we're just gonna leave it at 0. I clicked the wrong button. Last thing here is color grading. This is where you get the circles. This is where you get the famous circles. And they are also super simple. What these color wheels do is they adjust the overall color for the specific ranges. So on your histogram, you head on up and you see shadows, exposure, which is midtones, highlights, and etc. You go down to the color wheels, you see shadows, midtones, highlights, and you can adjust the colors for those specific ranges. So some people might like to move the highlights to yellow, and some people might move the shadows to blue. This creates a contrast in the scene that does look pretty good. You can mess around with this, but that is everything color manipulation. Those three tabs, calibration, tone, color mixer, color grading, and then in the basic area, that is not 3 tabs, but you get the point. That is how you can manipulate your colors, and it's very important, and it helps you create your style. But again, you don't need to create your style with these color manipulation tools. That's the end of lesson 3. I'll see you in lesson 4.